What's up, faithful? You're listening to another episode of the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, a part of the Odyssey Network. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. I'm Brian. He's Al. The 49ers have a second-year quarterback who's experiencing second-year quarterback growing pains, and the fan base is ready to jump off a cliff after 3 straight losses from the 49ers. I I texted our group chat last night and I said, hey, at least my prediction was right, because I did predict that this would be a loss. I didn't want to be right, but I was. Al, what are some of your takeaways from this game? Was this one where you were yelling at your TV, or is this one where you're like, nope, I'm just gonna have to drink more to get through this?
It was definitely an alarming game for me. And I mean, where do you start? It's a perfect storm of just kind of shit right now between not having Deebo and Trent, and the defense just completely going in the tank. And we're going to talk about that at length and some stats that are just scary. But let's start with Brock, like you said, because he's been playing, to say something that you said, like a 23-year-old quarterback. That's what he's been playing like. And I think in some ways there's been an unfair amount of, I don't know, people just treat him like he's a 4th or 5th year player and he just should be good. And then I had people saying to me too, well, didn't they move on from Trey Lance because they didn't want to go through this with Lance? No, they moved on from Lance because they didn't think he was very good. And they thought Purdy was much better. I mean, if they thought Lance had this huge ceiling and he was going to be a great quarterback, Lance would still be here. Lance would not have been beaten out by Sam Darnold, but I don't want to get into that. They rolled with Purdy because of how good he looked last year. They trusted what they saw, but they knew, everybody knew, with who's looking at this in reality, that there were going to be ups and downs. Now, the reason you think you could get through those ups and downs is because you have a top, what we thought, 3 or 4 defense and playmakers all around him. So the only thing Brock Purdy was supposed to have to do this year was play point guard. Make some big throws here and there, but mainly play point guard and don't screw it up. The past couple of games, he's been asked to do more than play point guard. They've gotten behind. They've needed him to drop back and throw, and maybe it's a case of him doing too much. I wrote down the 5 throws that were, I guess, turnover worthy, if that's how you want to put it. But there were also some throws, Brian, he threw that were dimes. Some of the plays downfield that he threw to George Kittle, oh my God, that throw from the end zone at the end of this second quarter, my God, he made some great throws. But again, at the end, things just kind of fell apart a little bit.
Yeah, I thought there were some really nice bright spots from Brock Purdy in his game yesterday. And obviously, fourth quarter turnovers are going to sink a lot of teams. I get that. And Brock has to take better care of the ball. And I would say that there, again, one of the things that we love most about Brock Purdy is his decision making. It's what's between his ears, and that's what allows him to overcome some of his physical limitations. But if his decision making is going to start regressing, or there were some poor decisions even in that incredible run, and just some luck with those not turning into turnovers, whatever the case may be. Whatever the case may be, if there's going to be regression there, that's going to be tough to overcome for his game, because again, he does not have the physical tools to really just kind of take over a game like a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, a Patrick Mahomes, whatever the case may be. Now, does that mean that the sky is falling? Absolutely not. And what I like most about him is his unflappability. And while that hasn't necessarily shown itself in the fourth quarter, I don't feel like he goes out there without the confidence that he can get these things done. The decision-making, again, is suspect at best. I think we can chalk that up last game against the Vikings to suffering a concussion. I don't think you can chalk that up here. The first interception that he threw, that's a play where he knows what that play was supposed to be. It was a busted run play. And he should know that because it's a run play, even if it's busted, by the time he goes to throw that ball, you're going to have offensive linemen downfield, which means that even if you complete that pass, it's coming back for illegal man downfield. Dirt it. Throw it away.
Do something
like that, right? Don't think that you can make a play when whatever play you make is going to be negated anyway. Decision making. The second one, my God, I thought he had a 10 on his back with that interception, because that was a classic Jimmy Garoppolo not seeing the underneath defender and throwing it directly to him. That's one.
Did you see?
No excuse.
I don't know if you did you see Mayoko or Kurt Warner break that play down? So I guess what happened, and this isn't, I mean, Brock probably still should not have thrown that ball, but either the design was bad or somebody ran the wrong route. Because if you watch it, I think it was Jennings and Ayuk. They basically ran to the same spot on the field. So you had two guys coming across the middle at the same spot in the field, and the defender just kind of bunched there. And I don't know what Purdy thought, if he was going to go to the left and he stayed there, whatever it was. So Brock still looked like he threw it directly at him. So again, I'm not making an excuse for him, but if you watch that play, Kurt Warner put it on his timeline, and Mayoko was talking about it on NBC Sports. He had just spoken about it, but Warner actually breaks it down where you could see the design of the play and the two receivers kind of bunched together.
And that's another thing. If you go out there and you look at guys like Kurt Warner, you look at guys like JT O'Sullivan, you look at guys that have played the position before, that have broken down Brock's game, they're largely very, very high on Brock and how he's playing, even his game yesterday. And the other thing that the silver lining that I want to take away from that game is his sneaky athleticism. Brock Purdy's escapability is very, very good. And not only that, but he's got enough juice to scramble for 57 yards. Now, part of the problem is that their run game has been non-existent. And that's the thing. And here's my biggest takeaway. I said this to you before we started recording. My biggest takeaway, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and I appreciate that there's a large number of fans that have interacted with that and largely found, haven't been ready to jump off the cliff. But Brock Purdy is 23 years old. He'll be 24 in December. He still has not started a full season of games in the NFL. If you are mad at Brock Purdy, your anger is misplaced. Brock Purdy is a second-year quarterback who is going to make these mistakes. He is going to. What the 49ers determined was that they believed that he would make these mistakes less often than Trey Lance would, which is why they went with Brock Purdy. Let's not mention Trey Lance's name again, because that doesn't matter. That's over. But if you, again, are angry at Brock Purdy, that anger is misplaced, because where that anger needs to go is to the decision makers, aka Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, who put Brock Purdy in this position, decided to go with a second-year quarterback because it allowed them to continue to spend money on what is supposed to be an elite defense and elite offensive playmakers. They've done that, and those offensive playmakers, that elite defense, is supposed to be able to prop him up when he goes through situations like this, inevitable situations where his play is not going to be at a high level like it was through the first 5 games of this season. And to me, that's the real story. The real story is this defense, what the hell is happening? And then the other thing that I came away with is, as much as we talked about Brandon Ayuk being the better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel, and I still stand by that, it is really evident now how important Deebo Samuel is, not only to this offense, but to Kyle Shanahan as a play caller. You can see Kyle Shanahan misses Deebo because there's so much that he can do to get his offense back in rhythm simply by getting the ball in Deebo's hands, and he's missing that. Yeah. And so all of that leads to anger at Brock Purdy. And like I said, it's just misplaced. He's a second-year quarterback. This is going to happen. The growing pains are going to happen. The problem is you had Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch say, we got rid of Trey Lance because this is a win now team, and we cannot what was it? We can't be going through growing pains with a quarterback who is still learning, because this team is ready to win now. And it's Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch who said Brock Purdy is the real deal. Is being the key word there, right? Declarative. They said he's the real deal. Now, when he struggles, the fans go, wait a second, you told me he was the real deal. He shouldn't be doing these things. And I'm like, wait a second. I understand what they said, but take a step back and go, this is still a second-year quarterback who was taken with the last pick in the draft for a reason. Has he exceeded those expectations? 100%. Did a lot of people miss on him? Probably. But is he a top 10 quarterback right now? No. Did he play like that through the first 5 games? 100. Absolutely.
Yep.
And we had that conversation. We said we're not willing to place him in the top 15 overall, but just in the context of the 2023 NFL season, he was playing at that level. He's not playing at that level right now. So the defense and other areas of the team are going to have to step up. Otherwise, they're going to continue to lose those games.
Yeah, and you mentioned Deebo, and his statistics didn't necessarily show it the last year plus, but just his presence on the field. Just maybe if you look at his stat line and he has 2 catches for 47 yards, but one of those was a 35-yard screen play when they were backed up and he took the ball and got the Niners in a good spot. They missed that. They missed the threat of him. And you mentioned the running game, where they missed Trent Williams a lot. I mean, they missed Trent Williams in a lot of other ways because this offensive line looks very ordinary at best right now without him. And now Aaron Banks is going to be out for a few weeks on top of it. So who knows? They need to get Trent Williams back. But without Trent Williams in week 7 and 8 running to the left side, the Niners had 14 carries for 28 yards in 0 explosive plays. With Trent Williams in weeks 1 through 5, 60 carries, 309 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, 8 explosive plays. And our buddy Akash put up that stat. And the running game has been non-existent. McCaffrey's first 4 games, 80 carries, 459 yards, 5.73 yards per rush. Last 4, 57 carries, 193 yards, 3.38 yards per rush. Do you know how many yards Eli Mitchell has in the last 3 games, Brian? Just take a guess.
-4.
Oh, you're close. I thought you were going to go to the positive side of things, like 1 or 2. He's got 6 carries for -2 yards in the last 3 games.
I was close.
That is what we're going with Eli Mitchell too. This team is getting, I have to find the stat, but they had, I think, on 17 yards before contact, I think, in this game, the running backs. So they're just getting hit. Offensive line is not doing the job. The Niners are getting in a lot of 3rd and longs. The Niners are making a lot of mistakes. The drop passes. Brandon Ayuk dropped a pass in this game that would have given them the ball on
hit him in the face mask.
Cincy 40, and maybe you get a shot for a field goal. I mean, Purdy was 4 or 5 of throws 20 plus in this game, 20 yards plus, with the lone incompletion being to Ayuk. You had a holding call on Juwan Jennings that I thought was unnecessary. On a screen to McCaffrey that pushed them back, and they ended up getting 3 on that, but maybe they get 7. Just a lot of things that they're doing to just shoot themselves in the foot. And Purdy is guilty of it, but they're doing it all over the field. The running game right now, that's the scary part to me, because the team's built on defense, the team's built on running the ball, and you're seeing with the team as a whole in general. Shanahan's 0 for 39 now, being down in the 4th quarter, so many points, whatever it is.
Points. I think it's
8 plus points, 0 for 39. Because when this team gets behind, they can't play from behind.
No.
They can't score. Even when they're moving the ball quickly, it seems like they're still not moving the ball quickly. Everything's methodical. Everything takes time. They're not a come from behind team, and they're a front running team. And that's been a problem that's been evident the last 3 weeks. When they get behind, the other team can put their foot on the gas and win the game easily, especially now that the defense isn't getting stops and isn't playing anywhere near up to their level.
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know if it's going to take Anthony Lynn. I don't know if it's going to take somebody else in the coaching staff, but somebody has to go to Kyle Shanahan and be like, hey, Kyle, Elijah Mitchell is not the same player that he was in 2021. We have
the Jordan Mason the ball.
We have got to stop putting him on the field. You cannot continue. I don't care what he did in 2021. I don't care what he did in 2022, which wasn't a lot. Stop putting him on the field. You are putting this team at a disadvantage. He is not the same player. He has not earned any playing time. None. Meanwhile, you got this other kid who runs like his hair's on fire and is averaging over 4 yards a carry. Let's get him some run. Let's get Jordan Mason on the field. If you're going to spell Christian McCaffrey, stop doing it with Elijah Mitchell. He's not it anymore. Move on. And I don't know. I'm not saying that you have to cut him, but at the same time, cut him. Bring someone up from the I don't care, right?
Mhm.
See what TDP has. But Elijah Mitchell
don't trust
is
him.
not it. It's not it. He's not it anymore. Stop using
him. 22 carries for 50 yards this year. In the last 2 weeks, Niners running backs have 16 carries for 44 yards and 17 carries for 56 yards. And the stat I was looking for in week 8 was 1.1 yards before contact. So it's just nothing's working with the running game right
now. And that's the other thing. Kyle Shanahan has spent his entire career believing that outside of left tackle, you don't have to put many resources into the offensive line. And it is showing itself to be an absolute travesty right now. They are a sieve right now. And even if Trent Williams was out there, it's not going to help that much. It might have helped against the Bengals because Nick Wagner of ESPN put this out. Colton McKivitz actually had a really good game in pass protection. He had a pass rush win rate of 96.4%, which led the team. But Jalen Moore and Spencer Burford, who, by the way, Spencer Burford is absolutely pissing all over the legacy of that number 74 right now because he is awful. He's awful. And I don't understand why John Feliciano is not subbing in for him. This is not a player like Aaron Banks, who played really, really well last year, so you're giving him a long leash. He's a player that played last year and that you continue to sub Daniel Brunskill in and out for. Like, he didn't prove anything to you last year. And now it's just like, Chris Foerster said in camp, basically, this job is Spencer Burford's to lose. Well, guess what? He's lost it. He's not good. He's not good. But now you can't plug Feliciano in because he has to plug in for Banks because Banks is injured. And it's just, it just feels like they're watching all of this happen and going, well, let's just try it again next week. Same thing, same guys, same whatever. And it's just like, you got to try something different. But this offensive line is awful this year. Absolutely awful. And they cannot run block to save their lives unless they're running behind Trent Williams. Well, guess what? If that's all that you're going to put on tape, eventually that's going to get stopped too. So what are you going to do then? And is there an answer? I mean, at this point, you have to say no. The trade deadline, we're recording this Monday at it's 4:00 now. The trade deadline is less than 24 hours away. I know there are rumblings that the 49ers are pushing for Jalen Johnson of the Bears and possibly Montez Sweat from the Commanders, which both of those moves would be great, but that doesn't help you on the offensive line. And I mean, what's it going to take to get this running game going? Now, we've been here before, right? 5-3 is only the second time in Kyle Shanahan's tenure in San Francisco that this 49ers team has been above 500 after 8 games of the regular season. Yeah. So this is the second best record after 8 games that Kyle Shanahan has had as the head coach of the 49ers. The only one better being 7-1 in 2019 when they went to the Super Bowl. So we've been here before.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they've turned it around, and you know who's had a big game when they turned it around is Deebo Samuel. And maybe it takes Deebo to get this running game back to where it needs to be, again, just because of the gravity of who he is as a player and what he allows you to do and how multiple he allows you to be. And so I hope that he's back for that Jaguars game after the bye. It sounds like that's the plan. But then the other question is, if your offense is that dependent upon one player or 2 players, if you want to include Christian McCaffrey, you're placing your offensive success on the back of a player that tends to be hurt a lot in Deebo Samuel.
And I still think they've been moving the ball. They're not finishing.
Yeah.
They have the guys on the field. Now, Deebo makes a huge difference. We're not saying he doesn't, but they have enough. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, they have got Kittle, Ayuk, McCaffrey. They have enough guys where they should be doing better than they're doing.
Well, and I tweeted it out during the game yesterday. It's like Kyle Shanahan, when he realizes, oh, hey, if I get George Kittle involved in the passing game, good things happen. Like, imagine that. Look at us. Imagine, it was the Paul Rudd gif of who would have thought we'd be here. Yeah, who'd have thought? And it's like, I just sometimes I'm like, I don't understand Kyle Shanahan's process or thought process at times. Now, again, if you're listening to this, are Al and I on here saying Kyle Shanahan is the problem and needs to be gone? Absolutely not. But he is not above criticism, just like nobody on this team is above criticism. And in the end, 17 points a game over the last 3 games also isn't going to cut it on offense. So again, it's not just the defense. The offense has some egg on their face as well. But that's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern, again, is on that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and before we have a lot to say about the defense, but before I do want to give a shout out to Kittle. George Kittle passed Vernon Davis for the most receiving yards by a tight end in 49ers history. Kittle has 5,697. Davis had 5,640. He's 205 yards behind Billy Wilson for 5th all time in Niners receiving yards. And Wilson's 5,902, so he should get that this year. Next up is Gene Washington, 6,654, and the great Dwight Clark, 6,750. So probably next year for him. He's really got a chance to keep climbing up the ladder in 49ers franchise history, which is a cool thing. He deserves it. All right, defensively, Brian. I mean, there's so many numbers here to talk about. You got Kyle Shanahan talking about Steve Wilks in press conference like he's a disappointed parent, that he's got to talk to him about this and that. He's going to talk to him about maybe being on the field instead of
which, by the way, is such a dumbass argument. Like, who gives a shit if he's in the booth or on the field? It's not going to make a difference.
Who cares? And I don't want to hear either. Like, well, like I've seen, Salah and D'Amico Ryans were rah-rah guys. If you have dudes out there, you know what should make you a rah-rah guy? Making $20 million a year. You shouldn't need somebody to fucking get you pumped up. Like, give me a break. These are professionals. But I don't think it's that. I think it's the scheme that is the issue right now. Now, I was listening to Richard Sherman talk. I think it was his podcast.
Yeah.
I just watched clips, so I think it was his show.
Yeah.
But he said what he thinks they need to do is they need to go back to what they do. And he talked about the Niners are playing man-to-man on 1st and 2nd down. It's not working. They're running stunts instead of letting these guys just get right after the quarterback. It's not working. They're not getting to the quarterback. Just listen. Again, we have so many numbers that we're going to throw out on the show of just the absolute dog shit that this defense has been. But let me just start with this one. The last 2 weeks, terrific quarterbacks. I'm not saying they're not, but Kirk Cousins, 35 of 45, 378 yards and 2 touchdowns. Joe Burrow, who at one point completed 19 straight passes, 28 of 32, 283 yards, 3 TDs. That's a total, Brian, of 63 out of 77 the last 2 weeks. 81.8% completion percentage, which is just, I mean, a defense allowing that is just absolutely atrocious. I can look at this really quick. Give me 1 second. That is the highest completion percentage ever allowed by a 49ers defense in a 2-game span ever. Insane. 661 yards, 5 touchdowns for those 2 quarterbacks. Just making it look easy out there. There was one play where Tony Romo called it out on the TV. It was a 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 around midfield. And he's like, the whole left side of the defense is open. He's like, Romo's like, they're going to go here, Jim. They're going to throw the ball here. Bro didn't even throw the ball. He just called his own number and just ran fucking 10 yards for the first down. Just lost right now on defense. This defense has already allowed over 350 yards 4 times this season. Last season, they did that twice. They missed 13 tackles in this game. How can a team with Fred Warner and Funga and Greenlaw, I think Greenlaw's playing hurt, but still can't tackle. They've had 32 missed tackles, 32 in the last 3 weeks. This defense has been absolutely atrocious. Joe Burrow, 37% of his throws were what would be considered open throws, which as a defender is not within 3 to 5 yards.
3 to 5 yards,
and it was the same thing last week against the Vikings. Just everything they threw, it's like, oh, that guy's wide open. There's nobody near him. They can't get home. And even when they do get pressure, quarterbacks just get rid of the ball and it's an easy completion. So it's not working schematically. They have the talent there. You cannot tell me the talent is not there. It is. I don't think they're as good at defensive end as they thought they were going to be. And I've been saying that for months. There's an issue at defensive end other than Bosa. I don't think they're as good there. But other than that, they are too good to be playing this shitty.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when you start to break down what is the issue, let's not forget that the players have some fault to wear as well. And largely in the past 2 games, that has been missed tackles. Nick Wagner from ESPN said that and through the first 5 weeks when the 49ers were 5-0, looked like the best team in the NFL, looked like the best defense in the NFL. They had given up an average of 49.4 yards after contact per game, which was second best in the league. The last 3 weeks, that number has jumped to 100.7 yards after contact per game. So twice as much, right? So they are hitting players, and players are gaining twice as many yards over the last 3 weeks that they did through the first 5. That 107 yards after contact per game is second worst in the league during that span. And it's an almost dead even split of those 100 yards after contact in the ground game and in the pass game. So
I didn't even give my running stats. They suck too.
Yeah. But not only are they not tackling ball carriers, they're not tackling receivers once they catch the ball as well. And that to me was the biggest issue yesterday, because Burrow's time to pass was 2.69 seconds, but he was just willing to take the easy throws that the 49ers were giving him, which is theoretically that's their bread and butter, right? That's what zone defense is. It's give them the ball in front of the sticks, rally and tackle. Give them the ball in front of the sticks, rally and tackle. That's what zone defense is about. And this game, for whatever reason, like you said, Richard Sherman pointed it out, they played man on 57.9% of Burrow's dropbacks, and Burrow was 14 of 17 for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Wow.
They don't have man coverage corners. They don't. Now, Mooney Ward was elite at man coverage when he was with Kansas City. He hasn't been that same player. And I would say largely that Mooney Ward is one of the guys that I've probably been most disappointed with this season, and even maybe a little bit last season. The 49ers are paying him, now granted, not as much as other teams pay their top corner, but they're still paying him top corner money to be their shutdown corner. And he's not really living up to that right now.
No.
And I feel like as much as Isaiah Oliver is incredible when it comes to tackling for a defensive back, and he's a great blitzer, he allows almost 100% completion in coverage. And so that's why
out of 40 throwing his way this season.
Yeah.
87.5%.
And
second worst in the NFL.
That's why I think it's important that they do go out and they get someone like a Jalen Johnson who can come in, man the outside, and push Lenore to the slot. It upgrades the slot. It upgrades your outside coverage. And then I think Jalen Johnson then becomes your 1, and Mooney Ward becomes a high level 2. I think that's Mooney Ward's best. His best role is as a high, a high upside or a high level number 2, opposite a legitimate number 1. And Jalen Johnson has proven himself to be a legitimate number 1 in the NFL with the Bears. Now, can they get that across the finish line before the trade deadline? I don't know. But the tackling is where, the tackling is where the players have to own it. But like you said, I really do think it is scheme related. Steve Wilks came into a very nice situation where he's like, you don't need to change anything.
Nothing.
And he has. And he's tried to change a lot of things like coverage, which, we talked about the difference between Wilks and Ryans and Saleh being that Ryans and Saleh were linebacking. Well, Ryans was a Pro Bowl linebacker and then a linebacker coach, but Saleh was a linebacker coach, and Wilks was a secondary guy. And then we're like, hey, maybe bring in a secondary guy. You let Chris Kasurik worry about that defensive line, and now you got a guy that coaches up the secondary. Maybe the secondary could, take a step up. Well, that has not happened in the slightest. And again, I don't know if Wilks doesn't really know how to call his own defense. I don't know what the deal is, but regardless, Kyle Shanahan's going to have a come to Jesus meeting with him. And honestly, like it feels like to me, there's already been reports that Shanahan has spent more time in the defensive room than he has in the past, because it's, Wilks is new, and I just don't think that he has the full trust in him like he did with Saleh and Ryans. And I would imagine that he's going to spend even more time now. And that's not ideal. It's not ideal for Wilks. It's not ideal for just, tension in the workplace, if you will. And then also that means he's spending less time on the offensive side of the ball, which is where the 49ers need him to be. That's where, that's where he makes his bread and butter. So yeah, it's a lot of things. But the biggest to me is the scheme is not working. They are not, the marriage between pass rush and coverage is nowhere to be found like it has been in years past with Saleh and with Ryans. And that has to be fixed like right now, or this team isn't going to do anything, let alone make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, QBs the last 2 weeks, Cousins and Burrow have 144.4 passer rating when under pressure against the Niners. So it's definitely not jiving like you thought it would. Here's what bothers me, I think, the most about all of this. Something is wrong, and it's evident. The players are, whether they're upset or whatever it is, you could just tell there's a disconnect on the field. The past couple, well, really the past 3 weeks, I think, the Cleveland game was a physical game. But I feel the past against Minnesota and definitely against the Bengals, it's like the defense just doesn't have their edge at all. And we said going into this game, we talked about how the Bengals are going to be under center more, and it's going to help their running game. Now, coming into this game, the Bengals were averaging, I think, 69.5 yards per game and 3.5 yards per carry on the ground. Against the 49ers this week, they ran 27 times for 134 yards. Joe Mixon, 16 for 87. Joe Burrow hit 43 yards on 6 carries.
Mm-hmm.
He had, I think, 12 yards coming in, 14 yards. Now, granted, he was hurt, but still, Burrow's not a guy that you expect to get 40, 50 yards on the ground. Joe Mixon was just trucking dudes, just running through people in this game. That is not the 49ers. Usually the Niners come out and just set the tone. Like Dre Greenlaw comes out and body slams somebody. Fred Warner comes out like a rocket and just, first series, just kills a running back. And you're just like, oh, man, like the Niners, they came to play. I'm just not seeing that out of anybody on the defense. They just look flat. And you see them talking after the game. They're like, Bosa said last week, well, we're not used to this. There's things we're doing that are different. They don't have that same edge right now. It's almost like they feel like, and I'm just guessing here. I don't know this for sure, but like we're going out on the field and we already know we're put in a bad spot. It's like they're playing like they know that already. You know what I mean? They don't have the edge. They don't have that confidence. They don't have like we're going to come out here and set the tone. They're playing like something is wrong off the field. And then they get on there and it's just like, well, this isn't us. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if it's going to be a come to Jesus with Steve Wilks. I don't know if it's going to be a firing of Steve Wilks.
Yeah.
If things continue on this way, he's one and done here at best.
Certainly.
He's not coming back next year if things continue like this. But something has to change. Kyle's got to tell him, like, we're going back to our bread and butter a little bit more. Whatever it is, I don't know, but it cannot continue as it's going because there's something wrong on and off the field right now.
Well, and here's where I think the disconnect is. I think it stems from this. Steve Wilks is not a rah-rah guy. And like you said, if this defense needs a rah-rah coach in order to get that fire, like, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that this defense did indeed feed off of the fire that Saleh and Ryans had on the sideline. Does that mean I want Steve Wilks to come down and try and fake that? Absolutely not. But I do think that in the end, it's a personality issue. And the one thing that you got to look at is this. And I am not saying that there aren't guys Steve Wilks' age that are just red asses, because there are. But Steve Wilks is significantly older than both DeMeco Ryans and Robert Saleh. And I wonder if there's a disconnect there when it comes to connecting with the players, because Saleh and Ryans, they're players coaches, right? They connected with their players. They were part of setting the tone when it came to the fire, the edge, the killer mentality, right? I was listening to Candlestick Chronicles with Kyle Madsen and Chris Biederman, and Biederman pointed out that when Saleh and Ryans were both here, part of the after or the next week film session, right, was something that they called loafing, right, where they would put the film on, and if they saw anybody that was not giving 100%, they got called out in the meetings in front of the entire defense for loafing, right, for not putting in full effort. And I gotta wonder if that's Wilks isn't doing things like that. Wilks isn't holding these guys accountable. And again, does Wilks have to change who he is? No, but that's also what the interview process is about. If you were the one, Kyle Shanahan, who interviewed Steve Wilks, and you thought it was important that he was going to be on the field, and you thought it was important that these things were going to happen, and those weren't questions that you were asking, or you asked those questions and you got answers that were different than what you wanted, and you still said, okay, but we'll still go with this guy, that's on you, right? And one of the things that we've talked about that I think is an underrated aspect of why Kyle Shanahan is such a good coach is his eye for coaching talent. And it certainly seems like he may have swung and missed on this one, which could be the first time that we've seen that. Now, again, we're 8 games in. Can Steve Wilks make adjustments? I'm sure that he can. Will he make adjustments? I'm sure that he'll try. Will they be effective? We have no idea. But it certainly feels like this defense misses Robert Saleh and misses DeMeco Ryans. But not only that, I think another underrated thing we don't talk about is just the drain of coaching talent from that side of the ball and just this team in general, right? Every time a coach gets a head coaching job, McDaniel in Miami, Saleh in New York, and now Ryans in Houston, they are taking coaches from the 49ers coaching staff with them. And a lot of the I would say on the defensive side, Kasurik is probably the most important position coach, and he has stayed. And even Johnny Holland, the linebackers coach, he has stayed. But there's also something to be said there. And here's the other thing: if you fire Steve Wilks, who are you replacing him with?
Yeah, that I have no idea.
You didn't feel like internal. And you didn't feel like anybody internal was ready for that job. Otherwise, you would have promoted them, because that's what you did last time. You felt like Ryans was ready and you promoted him. Obviously, you made this outside hire because you didn't feel like Daniel Bullocks or Johnny Holland or Chris Kasurik were either ready to make that move to coordinator, or B, wanting to, right? Like, I don't think Chris Kasurik wants to be a defensive coordinator. I think he's perfectly content being the highest paid defensive line coach in the NFL. And I think that's what he's great at. And I think he should stick with that. But that's the other thing. I don't know that there is a solution to this Wilks situation in season. So now it's like, well, what does that mean for the rest of the season?
That's a little scary.
This is a Super Bowl or bust team, because that's what you told us. That's what you sold us. That's what you guys said, not us. You guys said that. And now
I think you hit on something, though.
I don't know.
So I got to push back a little bit, or just to disagree with the notion that, like, I understand that Saleh and Ryans did that, and that's good. I think that's good to have that accountability. But this isn't a team of like a bunch of young defensive guys who are finding their way and not sure what to say. This is a team with Fred Warner and Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead, and even Javon Hargrave, who's new, but still guys who have been here, guys who should be leaders, guys who should, if they do see somebody dogging it, they should be able to police it on the players. I'm not saying they're not doing that. They may be.
Yeah.
But if they need a defensive coordinator who's going to hold them accountable because they can't hold themselves accountable, that's a gigantic problem. Now, I'm not saying that they think, I'm not saying that's going on at all.
Right.
But that's the way I'm kind of looking at it. There's a story, not that most of the people listening to the show are probably Yankees fans, but Derek Jeter was not a vocal leader. But there's a story. It was, I forget which World Series it was because there's been so many of them. But Bernie Williams, who again, huge clutch performer. Bernie was phenomenal, but he showed up late to a World Series game, and Jeter just took him aside. Him and Bernie didn't make a scene out of it, and just was like, "Do you have somewhere more important to be? What the hell is going on?" type thing, and like that sort of thing. And I'm sure the Niners have guys who do that. They have a lot of great players, and Warner seems like a leader. But that's what I would hope is going on right now, is that there's stuff going on amongst the players where they're saying, look, guys, we got to figure this shit out. It's the bye week. Let's get our heads together. Let's do what we have to do. And if there are people that need to be held accountable, let's do that. I think sometimes that has to be done on a player level. And I'm, again, sure that they are, but maybe that's where they're headed right now.
Well, and Kyle Shanahan essentially said as much today. He basically said, you know what? We need to sit with this in the bye. And maybe it's a good thing to be able to sit with this so that we can come out against Jacksonville after the bye pissed off and ready to show that those 3 games are not who we are as a team. Those 3 games are not who we are as a defense. Those 3 teams are not who Brock Purdy is. 3 games are not who Brock Purdy is as a quarterback, right? Like, sit with it, stew with it, own it, right? Be uncomfortable in your own shittiness, if you will, and then look each other in the eye and say, I'm not willing to accept this. You shouldn't be willing to accept this. What are we going to do about it? Because I agree with you. I'm not saying that they have to get rid of Steve Wilks and bring somebody in who's going to hold these guys accountable. Because like you said, this is a veteran laden team. They should not need a coach to do it. Fred Warner is the heart and soul of this team. He's the guy that breaks down the huddle all the time. I have to believe that Fred Warner is going to light some guys up. And I have to believe that Trent Williams is going to light some guys up. And I have to believe that Deebo is going to light some guys up. And those are the guys that should be doing it, right? Those are the guys that say to the rest of the team, this is unacceptable. This is not who we are. This is not the standard that we've set. And we need to get our ass in gear. And I have faith that they will. I'm not, like I said, I don't think that the sky is falling. Like I said earlier, this is the best 8-game start under Kyle Shanahan since the 2019 Super Bowl season. So 5-3 is not the end. Now, the bigger issue is, the Seahawks are in first place, which sucks. And they just traded for Leonard Williams, which makes their defense better.
Yep.
And the Eagles only have 1 loss. So you also have to look at yourself and go, we fucked this up. We're not going to get home field advantage. We need to bust our ass to win every single game from here on out, and hope against hope that the Eagles can flounder a little bit, right? Their schedule gets really tough here moving forward. They get the Seahawks twice in the next 5 weeks. That's a big stretch for them. And this season is not lost by any means. It's not even getting away from them right now.
No.
They were 3-4 through 7 last year, and then won 12 in a row and made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. So again, none of this that we're talking about is us being like, well, it looks like this team sucks now. No, it's us saying we are viewing this team through the lens of, can they win a Super Bowl? Because that is what the expectation was set at. And right now the answer is no. But does that mean that the answer can't be yes moving forward? It's always been a second half team. And the second half starts against Jacksonville. And that's where we got to see what this team is actually made of.
Yeah, and the 49ers are actually 16-16 over their first 8 games the last 4 seasons. And I think they finished last year, they finished 9-0 after the first 8 games, right? And the season prior to that, they finished, I believe, 7-2. So again, you could be coming back off the bye.
They finished 10-0. They were 13-4.
Oh, it's 10-0. And then and then it was 7-2 the year before, whatever it was. So they can come back off the bye and lose one game or whatever it is, and they can completely get it back together. But we'll talk about it next show. We'll go over the trade deadline stuff, and also the Niners' next 7 games: at Jacksonville, 2 against Seattle, at the Eagles, Baltimore. So 5 of those next 7 games are tough ones. We'll talk about that next show and see how they did at the trade deadline. Maybe by the time everybody's listening to this show, they made a move. We'll see. But we'll talk about it on Thursday when we are back here. For Brian, I'm Al. Thanks, everybody.
Later.